tell me your name and a little bit about yourself, your
Yeah.
upbringing, just your passions, and just everything that you would like to share.
Everything I like to share.
Everything you would like to
That's
share.
always the hardest thing to do, right? To talk a little bit about yourself. But my name is Sylana Christopher. Some may call me Lana. Some know me as Pastor Sylana. I am definitely, a child of God. I'm a mother of three amazing children. I can't say they are children, the teens, and then my oldest adult. I was getting in trouble for that. I'm a community servant. I love doing different community work. I'm very compassionate about that. Activism. I'm a therapist. I'm a chef. I am an event planner. I'm just Sylana. I'm a person that is recovering from some things. I'm an overcomer and definitely a person that's in deliverance.
When I say
Yes.
domestic violence, what is the first thing that comes to mind?
The first thing that comes to mind when you say domestic violence to me is not even my own story. For me, it stems back with my mother and seeing how the abuse took place with my biological father and how he would abuse my mother maliciously, how he would abuse my siblings. That's when it first started for me. It must have been so traumatic that I don't even remember him ever putting his hands on me. But the stories that they tell me, are pretty drastic. But those memories I cannot remember for myself, but only for them. It was never the concussions that I've had in my own affairs, or the broken leg or knees or the bruises, the black eyes. It never goes back to that. It always goes further back, just knowing what my mother has gone through and my siblings have gone through, that thank God that we recovered.
How did you meet your abuser, and what was the relationship like in the beginning?
Whew. Well, I had to pick which one. I can say that the first started when I was 16 years old, and he was 19 years old. And when we're young, we think that we're just so in love. Everything is so perfect. I traveled out to Texas to live with my sister, and I met him. He was very charming, very charming, very sweet to me. But he had like this. I was attracted when I was young. I was attracted to like the thug mentality, those guys. And everything just started off perfect. There was never a warning sign for me. I just remember one day questioning him about a woman at work that my mom and him used to work at the same job place. So my mom was curious about this one woman because they would eat together. He was always on the phone with her when she wasn't at work. She would come and visit him and whatnot at work. So I asked him about that. And at that time, I was 8 months pregnant. And I remember sitting on the bed and I said, well, I just think that you're lying. There's something inside of me that says that you're lying. He said, are you calling me a liar? I said, no, I'm not calling you a liar. And that's what I remember, just crossed my face. And that was devastating to me because I had never been smacked in my face before. Yes. And I was sitting there and he was over top of me. And that's what I can recall that first time. But there has been multiple times in between. I think it's just like it became the norm for me. I stood in one relation. I would get into one relationship and went into another one and then went into another one. And this was over an expansion of about 12 years that I experienced domestic abuse from this person, that person, and the next. My last experience, I was 21 and I was married. I had gotten married young. And we would just fight. We would just fight every day. Yes, my husband and I, because of his infidelity, because of his anger. You know, he had a lot of things that he wasn't healed from his own past as well too. But I was his target. And there were signs with him. There were signs when he was angry, or there were signs when he would throw things against the wall, or when things didn't go his way, you know, how he handled those situations. But I never thought that it would be a day that he had put his hands on me, especially knowing all the things that I had been through for all those years, right? And he came into my life like a savior. You know, I was pregnant, and from the first day that I met him, he was I don't know what it is, but I just want to be there for you and the baby. And he was there for me and that baby, you know. And I lived in California at that time, so he came from California to Philadelphia, you know, and everything was perfect to me until it just wasn't, you know. I remember again him I was sitting on the bed, you know, having a conversation, you know, like, what is it about me? You know, and he says, it's nothing about you. It's just that I just want to do what I want to do, you know, and you just like in the way. How am I in the way? Are you questioning me? Oh, you know, and then bam, there goes the smack in the face. But by that time, you weren't just going to hit me and I was going to be okay with it, you know, so we had to fight. Yes. So it was many days of us going toe to toe fighting. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Were there ever times you questioned what you were going through as abuse, or did you not feel like what you were going through was abuse?
You know, the craziest thing for me is that I didn't see that, all right, this was abuse, because it became such a norm for me. You know, you're talking about someone that had grew up in, you know, witnesses as a child. And then when I started dating, it became a thing for me too. You know, and it's not that I looked for those, looked for those men. It's just that for some reason, that's where I was drawn to. And I believe that I just felt protected by a certain man type because I didn't have the protection with my father, you know? So I didn't really understand what love was. You know, and for me, love was, well, we're just gonna stick together no matter what, right? Even in this abuse, yes.
Did you ever feel isolated from friends, family, and support systems?
Oh, most definitely, most definitely. And if it was only that I created my own isolation because I didn't want anyone to know, because it was a secret. You know, I didn't know how my brothers would react. I didn't know how my friends would react. What would they think about me? That I was letting a man put their hands on me, and that I was, for me at that time, and it's not stupidity at all, right? But for me, I felt like they would say, "Oh, you're stupid that you stayed," not understanding that it is something that's so much deeper than that. You know, it's like a stronghold, you know, that keeps you in this bondage, you know, maybe because a thing that you just feel like you're scared to leave, for one, you know, because you don't know what's going to happen when you leave. You know, you don't know what's going to happen. You don't want to start over from scratch. For me, I had children, you know, so I didn't want to leave my child fatherless, you know, or anyone, just being the shame. I didn't want the shame from it, you know. But did I want to leave? Yes, I wanted to leave.
What resources or support system help you get out?
This one up here, God and God alone. Because I didn't run to anyone else at the beginning. I didn't run to anyone. From a very young age, my mother installed faith, taught faith. And that's what carried me over, was just believing, Lord, like, I need you to do for me what I can't do for me, you know, and I need you to do it now, you know, because certainly I really didn't love myself. I didn't see my worth at that time, you know. So the more I prayed, the more I stayed in my Bible, is the more that I began to have strength, the more that I became encouraged. But in the same token, during that time, that's also when I stopped getting into abusive relationships, but I became the abuser. Yeah, I became the abuser
Can
for
you share
many
some of that
years
experience? Yes.
later.
Can you share it from your perspective?
Yeah, of course. If I thought that you was cheating, if I thought that you was raising your voice at me, if I felt intimidated in any way, then I would take a swing at you. You know, I have to commend my youngest to their dad, because although he was a trigger for me, you know what I mean? He didn't deserve for me to put my hands on him. He didn't deserve for me to hit him with pots and pans and everything else that I did. He didn't deserve that, because no one deserves to to be abused. No one does. You know, that's what I did to him, and that's what I did to any male that I got into a relationship with. You know, because you were no longer going to abuse me, and I was going to settle for it. So now I became the monster, you know? And that's something that I thank God that He delivered me from. You know, I started going to different things, helping out with women against abuse, and, you know, I would go to different programs and things like that. I went through anger management and counseling because I had to be delivered, you know? It's just like growing up and you have a child that has been through bullying, and then they become the bully, you know, because it's the thing that you have to protect yourself. So I just felt the need that I just needed to protect myself. And even now, even to this present day, the residue that I have is I don't like for anyone to stand up in front of me. You know, if I'm sitting, I don't like men to be over top of me. You know what I mean? I can't take hollering and screaming. You know, my last marriage, my husband, because he was dealing with the issues that he was dealing with within himself, his first go-to was to holler and scream. So I remember coming toe to toe with him and saying to him, I think you need to settle it down. And he said, Sylana, I'm not scared of you. And I'll keep his name in closure, but I'm not scared of you neither. You know, and I just came that close. Because my thing became to just choke. It was not never, it stopped being where I'm putting my hands on you to smack you or to punch you. I just started choking guys out. Yeah. And I can remember the last time, just going back, where my husband put his hands on me. That was the last day. My mother and my father had to call the police on me because I had him on the ground and I was choking him and I was trying to kill him. Yeah, it took me there. You know, his face began to turn blue and everything else. The police came. They were, if you touch me, I'm going to break his neck. So what do you do in that situation? They just stood right there and they was trying to calm me down. And if it wasn't for my daughter, my oldest daughter, for her saying, Mommy, at the bottom of the stairs, she never will know how not only did she save his life, but she saved mine. Yes.
What has your healing journey looked like since you left?
Freedom, right? It gives you a sense of freedom, because I've learned who Sylana is, right? I've learned how to love myself. I learned how to properly love others. You know, and I share my story. You know, I help other women and other men that's in this situation. You know, I do the work out here. You know, because I don't want anyone to be in a situation that I was in. You know, it's captivity, and it's just not mentally, but it was things that happened to me physically, physical illnesses that took place because of everything that I was harboring in, you know? So I'm thankful for the journey because it makes me accessible to help other people. So if I had to go through it again, I probably wouldn't want to be honest, but I would if it's gonna save somebody else's life.
If you could speak directly to your younger self, what would you say?
Girl, sit down, stay in school. No, we're invest, invest. You know what I mean? Stay focused. I would have started early with opening different ministries and organizations and things like that. Yeah, I would have did those things. But definitely, just wait. You know, wait on God. I think that that's what I would say to myself. That everything that you want is in reach, but just wait on God to give it to you. Yes.
What would you tell someone who is currently in an abusive relationship?
What would I tell them? I would tell them it comes to a point where you have to really choose you. You have to really choose yourself. You have to love yourself. That we can only change ourselves. That we can't change anyone else. Right? So you have to make a conscious decision that this is not what you want for yourself and want more. You have to develop an escape plan. And sometimes that escape plan is escaping from here, your mindset, because everything begins in your mindset. You know, this is not what I want. This is not right, you know, and run. And don't turn back. Forgive. Forgiveness is the key to your healing. And I understand that some things might have been so traumatizing and so hard to forgive, right? But you're not forgiving for the other person, you're forgiving for yourself. And as long as you cannot forgive, then you'll always be in those bondage. You'll always be in those chains, you know? So that's what I would have to say to that other person. And cry. My God, cry. I've run women's groups, and we're not allowed to have tissues. You know, we're so quick. As people, we're so quick to give tissues, you know, because we want to wipe tears and stuff away. The Lord will wipe our tears away. Tears are cleansing. Allow yourself to be free. You earned them tears, you know? So that's what I would say. Cry and heal. Because if you can't cry, you can't cleanse. But what you don't deal with, you can't heal from, right? So you have to be able to feel everything, every emotion, you know, as hard as it may feel, or to go through it, you have to be able to feel so you can deal with it, so you can heal. And you can, it's not just recover, but the Lord will deliver you. And that's what I would say to them.
Do you believe there's life after domestic violence?
Absolutely. I'm waiting for God to send my king to me. Yes. And he's going to love me just as he's supposed to. Right. With his full heart, not his hands. Yes.